Look, I'm giving you a pass this time. Okay, just come back. I'll overlook it for now. What is this guy talking about? He must be clueless. It's time to give him a dose of reality. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. I've been married to my husband Mason for a year now. We met at a casual get-together hosted by a friend. We hit it off, started dating like any other couple, and eventually tied the knot. We're not getting any younger, after all. Mason's not the most exciting guy, but he brings a sense of peace. That's why I thought we'd make it to the end, till we're old and gray. We both work, so going hungry is not an issue. We got married without overthinking it. I handle most of the housework since we're both busy with our jobs. Mason never helps. He's either lounging around or heads out early, rarely spending time at home. But I never found housework to be a burden. My parents live like this too. I accepted this as the kind of life a wife would have. I have a 9-to-5 job and I'm not overloaded with hobbies. Mason and I were never chatty to begin with. We both respected each other's space, and it was never an issue. Life went on. One night, Mason came home late, presumably from drinking with coworkers, friends, who knows. I welcomed him. Mason, you're home late. Had a long night out, huh? Dinner's still there if you want it, but I guess you're not eating this late, are you? He turned around, said nothing, and walked into the living room, ignoring me. I sighed. Here we go again. Whenever Mason is in a bad mood, he gets very quiet, so I figured something at work or during his night out must have upset him. Best to let him be. I know better than to poke the bear when he's like this. I felt his presence from the living room but shrugged it off and went to bed. He'd probably be back to his usual self by morning. It was the same old story, and I didn't give it a second thought. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Mason came into the kitchen. Good morning. I greeted him cheerfully. Mason glanced at me, grabbed some milk from the fridge, and left without a word. I was taken aback by his coldness. It was out of character for him. Seemed like he was still in a bad mood. I never anticipated this. We've always prided ourselves on being a family of strong, independent individuals. I hadn't made an effort to talk to Mason, really. I decided to wait and see, so I continued prepping lunch boxes for both Mason and myself. However, things didn't go back to normal that easily. Mason remained distant the following night and the day after. At this point, I was genuinely concerned. Days turned into weeks, and Mason continued to give me the silent treatment. I tried reaching out through WhatsApp and even left him notes, but he ignored it all. However, he'd eat the meals I prepared. I noticed the empty lunchbox in the sink, so I knew he ate the packed lunch. So, I put a note in the cooler bag. I thought if he found a note while enjoying the lunch I made with love, he'd have to react. But that was another miss. Mason said nothing. Before I knew it, over a month had passed in this strange silence. I felt helpless. I had tried everything, but nothing worked. Then one evening, I took a drastic step. I deliberately didn't prepare dinner. Every evening, I made dinner when I got home. But what if I didn't? How would Mason, who's been ignoring me, react? I decided to find out. When Mason came home, I pretended to be watching TV in the living room. Mason came into the living room and looked intently at the table where dinner usually waited, but tonight the table was empty. After scanning the barren table, Mason turned his gaze to me. Holding my breath, I waited for him to say something, but he walked into the living room in complete silence. I heard the front door open and shut with a bang. I was stunned. Why was I being ignored like this? I had no idea. I was left bewildered, sitting alone on the living room couch. The next morning, I woke up and went to the living room. Mason was already gone. Had he left for work already? It was curious. I looked on the living room table and found a note. Reading the words on it, my eyes went wide. Stop skipping out on your wifely duties, it read, hastily scribbled in messy handwriting. Something inside me snapped. That's it. I'm done. Why do I have to keep pleasing Mason? Is this going to be my life forever? We were never a clingy couple, but this is just unacceptable. There's no reason for him to do this, nor an opportunity for me to even ask about it. For the last month, the stifling silence in the house has been unbearable. I wrote next to Mason's scribble, I'm going back to my parents' house. I quickly packed up my things and went home. My sudden arrival did surprise my parents, but after I explained how Mason had been ignoring me for over a month without any apparent reason, they understood and welcomed me warmly. It felt good to be in an environment where I could have a normal conversation. For now, I decided to stay here and see how Mason reacts before deciding on my next steps. I didn't hear from Mason the day I left. Knowing him, he's probably assuming I'm just trying to make a point and will continue to ignore me. Well, let's see how long this lasts. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no call or message from Mason via WhatsApp or any other means. He didn't even bother to visit my parents' house. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. I had nearly forgotten about Mason altogether. Then one day, as I was leaving my parents' house to go shopping, there he was, Mason, staring with a defiant and angry expression. I was shocked and froze in my tracks. Mason just glared at me, still not saying a word. Is this game still going on? It was almost laughable how silent Mason was. But then, in the next moment, he tried to walk into my parents' house without saying a word. Whoa, hold on there. I stopped him. Mason looked at me, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, but still silent. I warned. I said don't just walk in. I will call the police. Finally, after more than 6 months, Mason spoke, a snide smile on his lips. Look at you getting all up with me. Since when do you get so high and mighty? Just because you're at your parents' house doesn't mean you can act like that, you know. I remembered Mason being a bit rough around the edges, but not like this. Lost in thought, I was jolted back to reality when Mason suddenly erupted. What the hell are you thinking? You leave the house for half a year, enjoying yourself at your parents'. Get a grip. Mason ranted on, then spread his arms out as if to say, I can't believe this. Look, I'll give you a break this time, right? Just come home. I'm willing to turn a blind eye this time. Mason spoke so condescendingly. I calmly retorted, I think you're confused. You and I are strangers now, you know. Mason's face went blank, then turned beet red with rage. He started yelling again. What the hell are you saying? Did you lose your mind? We're married, aren't we? Stop messing around. His intense outburst silenced me for a moment, and he kept yelling. I'm saying I'll forgive you this time, so stop fooling around and pack your bags. At that moment, my own anger boiled over. He talks like he's doing me a favor by forgiving me, as if I've done something wrong. That infuriated me even more. Moreover, it seemed Mason had no clue what had happened in the last 6 months. Finally, I snapped at Mason, who was still yelling away. I received divorce papers from your mother, signed them, and already filed them with the court, so we're not married anymore. Got it? We're strangers. Total strangers. Understand? I emphasized the word strangers, and Mason looked at me, his face drained of color. He seemed genuinely shocked. Here's what happened. A month after I moved back to my parents' home, my then mother-in-law, Helen, called me to a cafe near our house. We had never been close, and I hadn't seen her for a while. After brief pleasantries, she handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked, tilting my head. Open it. Even you will understand, she said in response. I opened the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. It was a divorce petition, already signed and stamped by Mason. Confused, I looked at Helen. The eyes of his mother, who was glaring at me, were the same as Mason's, full of disdain. While putting the divorce petition back into the envelope, I asked his mother, so is this Mason's doing? Did he say anything to you about this? Helen let out an exaggerated sigh before answering. Oh yes, he said plenty. Would you like to hear? I smiled at her and replied, yes, please go ahead. She launched into her story. According to her, Mason had been bad-mouthing me for a while now, saying that I was a useless and incompetent wife who stopped doing any housework after we got married, that I quit my job and lazed around at home all day, and that whenever something didn't go my way, I would run back to my parents and act like a spoiled child. Helen's eyes never left mine as she spoke, and it was clear she believed every word of Mason's lies. There was no point in arguing with her, I thought. When she was done talking, Helen finally asked, so what are you going to do? Not that I want to meddle, but you're being pretty awful, you know. By the time I walked out of that house, my mind was made up. I smiled and told her, if he wants a divorce, then that's what he'll get. Helen glared at me one last time, slapped some money on the table for her share, and walked out of the cafe. I went straight to my parents' house, signed the divorce papers, and submitted them to the court the very next day. While I was explaining all of this, Mason's face turned increasingly pale. It seemed he hadn't been informed by Helen at all, But honestly, I didn't care. After all, I had already trusted Helen with the signed divorce papers. Mason must have had the same idea in mind, I figured. Once I finished telling my side, Mason blurted out in a panic, "No, you've got it all wrong. I only filled out those divorce papers to keep my mom off my back. I never intended to submit them. They're invalid." Panicked or just confused, he started making no sense. "And besides, you're the one who will suffer if we divorce, so let's go to the court right now and have them withdrawn." I gave Mason a cold stare, then tilted my head. Why would it be a problem for me if we got divorced? Mason suddenly grinned as if he had won. "Think about your age. At your age, with a divorce history, no one will want you. That's why I'm saying I'll take you back. This is for your benefit, you get it? I'm saying we can pretend the divorce never happened, and you should be happy." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at his arrogance and delusional thinking. Listen, we're not kids. A divorce doesn't just get erased. And for the record, I'm already married to someone else. Mason's jaw dropped, and he went silent. "What? Really? Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm married to someone else." Mason, who had a look of disbelief, suddenly started making a fuss. "That's a lie. You're just trying to look good, aren't you? You're making up stories to get me to go away, aren't you? You're really making a fool out of me. You know that such lies won't work." Well, if he wants to be a fool, that's his problem. As I was wondering how to explain to this idiot, a presence came from behind me and a man appeared at the entrance. The man looked at me and Mason alternately, looking confused. Mason, for his part, was surprised to see a stranger coming out of my parents' home and fell silent. When I looked at the man, he tilted his head and asked, "Is something wrong?" Feeling awkward, I smiled and turned to Mason. "This is my husband, Noah." "No," greeted Mason with a slight, skeptical nod. Mason took a step back and looked up at Noah. It made sense. Noah was a former national rugby player with an imposing physique. Overwhelmed by Noah's appearance, Mason suddenly started to make excuses. No, you've got it all wrong. My old boss told me you've been married for about a year now, and your wife might start to get a little uncomfortable. Better put her in her place." So I did, and guess what? Turns out he got dumped by his wife and kids. What a fool, right? I was just doing what he told me to do. I never wanted to do any of that stuff. You understand, right, Olivia? I looked at Mason with a gaze filled with disgust, fed up with his pathetic excuses. Mason looked puzzled, maybe because my reaction wasn't what he expected. Then Noah spoke up. "Sorry, but could you leave immediately and never come back here? If you approach Olivia again, I'll call the police." As he said this, Noah firmly pushed Mason out of the doorway. Intimidated by Noah's force and determination, Mason fled the scene. For a while, we both remained wary, concerned that Mason might harbor a grudge and do something irrational. But days turned into weeks, and we never heard from him again. One day, curiosity got the best of me, and I reached out to a mutual friend to inquire about Mason. We began by catching up on casual topics, but when I asked about Mason, our friend sighed and filled me in. Surprisingly, Mason had quit his job just a few days after showing up at my parents' house. The reason? It turns out Mason was always in agreement with his boss, whom he trusted when the boss harassed subordinates at work. It became a big issue in the company. As a result, the boss was resigned, a euphemism for being demoted to some remote mountainous area I'd never heard of. Apparently, Mason was expected to be transferred as well, but he quit out of pride. According to our friend, he's still jobless. He's been looking for work, but his arrogance has hindered his efforts. Even when recruiters offer him opportunities, he declines interviews. Furthermore, news of him quitting reached his mother, who then disowned him due to her own extreme personality. Finally, our friend said he blames everything on his old manager and just drowns his sorrows every day. At this rate, he'll ruin his health before he ever finds another job. It's a mess. I hope he finds a new spouse or something, though that's unlikely. We both chuckled as we hung up the phone. Mason seems to be drowning his days in job hunting and drinking. Thanks to him, I am now living a peaceful life with Noah. Interestingly, Noah was actually my colleague. Upon hearing about my divorce, he had eagerly pursued me. Though we started dating only 6 months after my divorce, which made me somewhat hesitant, I was quickly drawn to his confident manner and kind personality. After we got married, Noah told me that he had always had a crush on me and was heartbroken when I got married. I laughed and apologized for not noticing his feelings sooner. Noah helps me around the house, a task I used to handle alone. Whenever we eat together, he always says how delicious the food is with a smile. It's these little things that make me incredibly happy, something I never expected. I was probably numb to it all, having grown up with old-fashioned parents. Now I am living a sparkling married life with Noah, who always delights in even the most ordinary things. I'm convinced that with him, I'll have a happy life all the way through our golden years. And so, I was certain